Alright everyone, perhaps the worst that can happen with regards to the temporary travel ban that Trump proposed originally, as well as its eventual edit. He sort of toned it down slightly, then resubmitted it. Another injunction was issued by the Ninth Circuit. The worst possible outcome has now occurred, which is the Supreme Court is going to decide on that, decide whether to get rid of the injunction, let the temporary ban go forward, and or hear the overall case, which is, does he have the power to issue such a ban in the first place? The problem for this is that it's pitting executive and judicial power against one another. Do these lower courts have the ability to block something in a wanton manner without necessarily having the right to actually do so? See, the problem is this. A president can issue an executive order. Any of these major courts are capable of issuing an injunction to stop it from happening, even if it is not in their judicial purview to do so. That is the one major type of judicial overreach. The idea that the Supreme Court routinely hammers away at people and grinds down our system is generally not true. It's really more of an act of people who agree with the decision applaud it as a great thing for liberty. People who don't like it, they're sort of against it. This is like McDonald versus Chicago. Supreme Court weighs in, yes, indeed, the people have the right to bear arms. Specifically, is weighed in on, there was a time, now that overrules Cruikshank from the 1800s. There was a time when that was argued by some of the states as not being, in fact, it came from the southern states, the democratic states, of course, that indeed it was the military that had the right to bear arms, that individuals did not necessarily possess that right, that it was essentially a privilege under the Second Amendment. That's finally been overruled. You have issues like gay marriage, of course. It doesn't relate to religion, it relates to a state contract being issued. I said this over and over. A lot of people were astonished when the Supreme Court said, yeah, people who are gay, they have the right to marry. Because it's just a state contract. The federal government doesn't have the right to discriminate against citizens on that basis. You're talking about religious ceremonialism. Do what you want with that. Then you get the just bake the fucking cake stuff from like Gary Johnson, the fake libertarian or something like that. I don't care if you choose to bake the cake or not. But here's the thing. If they choose to take up the case at large instead of just saying, okay, well, the injunction, the temporary injunction, we're going to strike that down. Yes, he can go forward with it. If they end up taking up the case, which is that a lot of people don't want him to have the power to issue a travel ban at all, this really puts, I would think, our ability to maneuver in this country under question, regardless of what their decision is. If they decide that the president does not have the authority to, in any way, in any meaningful way, influence immigration, what happens in the case where the legislature is incapable of acting? The judiciary can't just say, okay, we're going to unilaterally block people from some country that happens to be falling apart or something. What happens if you get a swarm of refugees coming in under some program? Who would actually then have the power to stop that? If the legislature is deadlocked, if they're not able or willing to act, it gives them 100% of the pie when it comes to making these decisions. The judiciary can't make laws. They can only interpret and decide upon existing laws. If they defang the executive branch and make it clear, no, in no meaningful way can they weigh in on what happens as far as migrants, refugees, travel to and from certain countries, then you have a largely ineffective and constantly strangulated legislature being the people that make those decisions. I don't know that that's a great idea. On the other hand, though, if they weigh in on the case, they take the case fully, and they say, yes, Trump can actually do this, would that not give the executive branch excessive power potentially? And even if you like Trump, under Trump you may think, oh, well, that's fine. He's patriotic. He'll block people from destabilized terrorist-friendly nations. What about somebody in the future who decides to do something totally different? They say, oh, yeah, we can take 5 million people from Somalia and Pakistan and 10 million people from, the Arabian Peninsula. That's okay, but we're blocking European immigrants for one reason or another. Or we're blocking Japanese immigrants for no apparent reason or something like that. Or they decide, because they now have much greater executive power over immigration and movement as a total, What if they decide to screw with things further than that? What if they decide to screw around with the visa issuing system? Say, well, it's been made clear now. The judiciary branch has made it clear it's not fundamentally the legislature that has this power. It's just basically the executive branch can do what it wants. I'm going to grant, blanket amnesty or something like that. That could become a problem. It sets it up for a future legal battle. And all of these decisions the Supreme Court ever makes open up new decisions that can then be made down the road. That's the real problem. It's a situation where, because of the legalism in this country, it's very difficult to keep things insular, to keep them isolated from other potential showdowns down the road. Any decision that's made can be used as a precursor to some other greater social issue down the road. So either way, I would hope that they are not going to weigh in fully. I hope they strike down the injunction, say no. The judiciary simply doesn't have the ability under this specific circumstance. We find that it's appropriate and that it lies within his constitutional power to issue a temporary ban for some nations based on current events, based on the current level of instability. I hope they take that very restrained approach. Regardless of the composition of the court, right now it's basically 4 conservatives, 4 liberals, or people that lean conservative or liberal, and then there's that swing vote in there for any issue you get. And it really depends, by the way. I can't remember, is it Breyer, I think it is? Or, no, it's Kennedy. Kennedy on moral issues, and then the Chief Justice on sort of the other side, the foreign relations, domestic policy, not related to moral laws. So there are a couple of people in there that are kind of swing voters within the Supreme Court. Ultimately, though, we're putting the idea of travel bans and immigration and all of this in the hands of 9 people who have shown significant partisan leanings over, the entire course of our history as a nation. We've put it in their hands now because the Ninth Circuit decided it couldn't keep it in its pants. Trump was asking for a temporary freeze on immigration and refugees from a handful of nations. It was then billed by the corporate media and by the Ninth Circuit as an Islam ban, which was never in the language, it was never intended. It has to do with instability. And because they couldn't hold themselves back from deciding to issue a fucking injunction, and because they decided to do it again even with a watered-down temporary travel ban, we now have a situation where the ultimate judiciary body may very well decide, well, either the executive branch has no sway over this, it's just legislative, or the legislature will be toothless and the judiciary as well, except at the Supreme Court level, and the executive branch can do what it wants. Either way, I don't see great things ahead. It doesn't really matter what decision they make. I see it opening a can of worms for our country, regardless of which way they decide. They would have to be extremely constrained and legalistic in their opinion if they decide to weigh in order to not cause eventual political havoc in this country. My advice would be don't take the case at all. Just strike down the injunction and leave it at that. And if, again, one of these courts, and it would probably be the Ninth Circuit, decides to do this again, strike it down. Tell the Ninth Circuit to shut the fuck up before it endangers our republic. The amount of alienation you could cause by either making the American people feel like there's nobody who can stop constant chaos, nobody can build a wall, nobody can keep anybody out, nobody can really decide who's issuing what visas, or at the same time, as opposed to the free-for-all, that you give the executive branch too much power. Down the road, you get someone who does want limitless immigration, and now they're empowered to get it. They don't even have to worry about the judiciary anymore. There'll be nothing to stop them. That would be, by the way, my warning to people on the anti-left. You want sovereignty. You want border control. You want to feel safe in your communities, not be displaced. Okay. Giving Trump specifically that sort of power may be fine by your standards. What about if you get a president who totally disagrees with Trump in every way, shape, and form on the issue and says, oh, if we want to beef up our economy, we're going to need to take 100 million immigrants in. Who's going to stop them? It'll have to go to the Supreme Court. What if the legislature's not willing to act? Because the judiciary itself has weighed in and said these lower courts can't do anything. Who's going to take up a case if you have a bunch of Democrats running the House and Senate? No, I mean, they would be toothless even if there were people there that would want to stop them. They'd be toothless. What if they don't even bring a case forward to the Supreme Court? You could have an imperial president who believes very strongly in globalism, who ends up upending the entire fucking economy if they don't deliver a very constrained decision. That's the way that the judiciary can work. One decision leads to another, and that's really the hazard, I think. Nobody on the left or right should be very happy about the fact that it's even going to have to go before the Supreme Court. Hopefully they just say, okay, the injunction's over. Trump can proceed with a temporary travel ban from a few nations. We're just not going to weigh in on it. It's not a big enough issue. We're going to ignore it, folks. We're just going to ignore it this time around. Hopefully that's what they do. Also, what if they don't? And then the Ninth Circuit acts up down the road, and then Ginsburg keels over before they make their decision or something like that. Wouldn't that be funny? Because then definitely the executive branch gets its power. Legislature's totally toothless. Lower courts are totally toothless. You've set yourself up for failure if that happens. That's about all. Peace out.